Bonjour Thierry.
Good morning.
Good morning and welcome to this Friday morning virtual coffee and discussion on the topic of defining the future of remote work. What should be the future of remote work in our organization when a public health crisis recedes? Well, this is a question faced by many organizations of all types and sizes. My name is Odile Edouard Young with the French-American Chamber of Commerce in Minnesota, FACCMN, an independent nonprofit, non-governmental, membership-funded organization. It is my privilege to introduce Thierry Boudet today. Thierry is a member of the FACCMN and Director of Research Information Systems at the University of Minnesota. Given the large number of attendees this morning, Elizabeth Johnson-Hollod, also with the French-American Chamber of Commerce, and I will do our best to get to all your questions. Feel free to ask them in a Q&A session. Thierry's presentation is going to be recorded and attendees will be able to access this recording. Without further delay, I would like to give the virtual floor to Thierry. Good morning. Bonjour, Thierry.
Bonjour, good morning. Thanks for this introduction, and good morning to everybody who's joining us today. Might be good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the world. So that was a very nice introduction. Let me open my slides here and share my screen quickly. All right. Odile, can you see my slides? Can you confirm that?
Yes, I can.
All right, awesome. All right, so yes, I'm excited to be invited to talk about this particular question that all organizations at this point in time are facing in one form or another, defining the future of remote work and what it would be or should be once the pandemic recedes. So Odile already introduced me. I'm a member of the French-American Chamber of Commerce. I work at the University of Minnesota as the Director of Research Information System, and I'm the founder of Cap Nouveau. So what I'd like to do is provide a little bit of background. So here today, I'm here to talk about my professional and personal experience and not just speaking on behalf of the university. I want to make that clear. So I'll be happy to share a little bit about my experience and professional expertise in that field. A little bit of background, I think, is important. So while I'm a director of information technology, you might be surprised that I'm working on such a topic. So a little bit of background about myself is that in 2015, I started to work on implementing a model for teleworking and remote work in my team. And that model became used and a template for the rest of my department. So when the topic of trying to figure out what the future of remote work would be in my department, I was asked to co-lead with my a partner in the human resources. I was asked to co-lead that work, and so that's what I'm here to talk about today: is how we actually tackle this challenge, in the hope that you can use some of that information and maybe answer some of the questions you may have in that field, and at least give you a path forward or an example of how the problem has been tackled. A little bit more about the context for my organization. So I know everybody joining is in a different field or industry, and that's okay. I work at a large public institution at the in the United States. I work within a department that has 800 employees, but the organization or the institution itself has many more employees. So when I speak about my department, I talk about a division, if you will, that has 800 employees total. We are mostly administrative in nature. That said, we have a number of labs and other areas where we have employees that are designated as essential, who have been or need to be on site at all times. So just to give you a little bit of perspective of my context so that you understand that. So with that, let me give you a little bit of background. So as I see it today, why are we're looking at the future of remote work? And those are the forces that I see really driving the change and asking us to make permanent changes. So first, we have employees now. So in my case, we have some who have been remote for now 11 months total. So we have employees who have demonstrated over the past year that they're able to work remotely, they're able to be productive, and they like being remote. So they're asking, will I be able to continue doing that in the future? So that's one force. So that's why we need to ask ourselves what we're going to do in the future. Another area, if I look at the left, is managers. Managers are now seeing that for the hard to fill positions that they have, the jobs that are difficult to hire for, they have the opportunity, or they're asking, can I actually have this position become fully remote and I can hire for a much wider geographic area so that I can have somebody in that position. And so there is an opportunity therefore to expand where we hire from and to make those positions potentially fully remote. If I look at the right-hand side, from a financial standpoint, we either have an opportunity or we have a strain. So the economic situation in the world is, or the pandemic has affected organizations very differently. Some are still doing very well and others are really struggling. So if you're among the ones who are doing fairly well still, you just realize that with this remote work opportunity, you can reduce your real estate, maybe get rid of some of the leases and save a lot of cost and money, which would make you more profitable. On a flip side, if you're in a public institutions like I am, or if you're in a government agencies or some kind of service, and the budgets have been cut, we had furloughs, we had pay cuts, the budget for the future is looking pretty dim. So organizations are under stress to figure out how are we going to recover from this financial strain and what can we do? And obviously optimizing the space, trying to cut costs in that area is a strong motivator to get that done. And then finally, from an employer standpoint, there is competition, meaning that even if you do not want to rethink remote work, you can believe that the competition will, and employees who seek to have more options and flexibility will find a place where they can get it. So as an employer, the competition is such that you have to start thinking, what kind of new form of remote work can I offer in the future to my employees? I'm not going to go through all of those benefits here that are proven about remote work. There are tons of information out there. I'm just going to highlight a couple of them that I think are important, or at least for us, where I am, it has really become obvious. So number one, thanks to remote work, we've been able to remain operational and continue to operate. And so the resiliency that this has brought us has been significant. So remote work is a very strong asset for business continuity and operations resilience. The other aspect of things that have been pretty obvious this past year is the opportunity for that cost reduction or the cost containment. So if you want to reduce your overhead, that's a place that organizations have been looking at. And so what I'll do here is maybe just give you a little bit of perspective. And here are some statistics that I found, and you have the source at the bottom. It comes from Global Workplace Analytics. I don't know about you where I am, because we own the building. It's kind of difficult to understand the opportunity that we have with the space and optimizing the space. However, there are statistics out there, and this is the closest I found as a good motivator. This shows that for a typical employer can expect to save on average for an employee working half-time only, not full-time, about $11,000 per year per employee. At scale, this is really significant. Now, the other aspect of this for the employee, they can save a lot of money as well by working half-time remotely and save between $2,500 to $4,000 per year. Again, those numbers are for illustration. They're very, they're linked to the United States, but I assume that your mileage may vary depending on the region of the world where you are and what you do. But at the very least, what this should tell us, while it might be different and the context of your environment might be different, at the very least, what this says is that if you're an organization that has not optimized the value of remote work yet, this is the time to do this because for a number of reasons, financially, it might be advantageous not only to you, but it could be a win-win for the employee as well, who are seeking more flexibility and possibly to save some money at the same time. So that's just for perspective, and there's, again, plenty of information out there, but I encourage you to look at that because they've done a good job at detailing the different ways an organization saves, including by reducing absenteeism, for example, when you use remote work. So that was for the context. I think we all go through, we have the same force, we experience the same forces driving that thought process. We experience the same kind of pressure. In terms of how in my organization we've approached the work of tackling that question of rethinking remote work and how we can move toward a more advanced remote work culture, I was reflecting a little bit on the methodology that we used, and the methodology that you have in front of you, I realize it's very close to the design thinking process for those of you who are familiar. And I think it applies very well for situations where you have a blank slate. You don't know what the end result or what it is that you're going to implement at the end. In my world, when we implement a new software or big information systems, we know exactly what needs to be installed where. But when you start with a blank slate and you're not too sure what you should offer, that model has worked well for us. So there are 3 stages that we are going through. There was in the inspiration phase, the ideation phase, and implementation phase. And the little flag there shows that that's where we are. We're just at that point. In terms of inspiration, what we've done a lot of research and a lot of reading in the past 6 months. I think the good news for all of us is that remote work, teleworking has been studied for many, many years. There's tons of information and studies out there. So you can find anything. And in the past year in particular, there's been a lot of articles and white papers created on that topic as well. So tons of information out there that we reviewed. We also took the time to try to get the point of view of our employees and our managers to really understand where they are. The empathize aspect of the design process is to really try to understand how people feel about where they are, might they be employees or managers, to really try to get a feel for what's the best way of what's the information we really need to take into consideration as we model and try to ideate a framework forward. So we did some survey, then we started to put together a framework, a way to structure our remote work and prototype some ideas on how we could have a model that could be then rolled out and implemented. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. And so now we are ready. We are ready to test and iterate on that model. We have a support a model that we're going to use to help that implementation forward. And then we're ready to roll. So, and Odile and Elizabeth, I count on you to let me know if there are questions coming in. Please do not hesitate to ask questions. I don't mind going back or going forward as necessary to answer those questions. So I mentioned that we were looking at a model, but I think first we need to talk about this journey or the thinking that has to happen for all of us. And this is an illustration. So if you have that spectrum of being on site in an office, that's how the teams are working. Or on the other end, you have a situation where people are it's a fully virtual team working remotely only. Anywhere in between is a hybrid environment where you have a combination of people working in the office, on site, and some people working remotely. So just as illustration, if I were to think of my organization as a whole, not just my team, but organization as a whole, what we had to think about is, where were we in the old normal, pre-pandemic? Well, we were overall, mostly people were on site in the office. We had some people working remotely here and there, but really not more than 1 day or 2 days per week. And so that was the old normal. Then all of a sudden, because of the health crisis, at least where we are, we've been asked that whoever can work remotely must work remotely. Therefore, we only have specific individuals who are designated as essential employees working on site and performing very important work for the organization. So now we're about 80%, I would say we're 80% virtual and 20% on site. So that puts us on quite at the other end of the spectrum all of a sudden. And so the question is, where do we want to be when in the new normal, post-pandemic, whenever that the pandemic recedes? And that's really the question that we have to ask ourselves, and we're trying to define here. We all have a different journey on this spectrum. So your situation might be very different. If you're in a software company, you might decide that you can actually be fully virtual, and your opportunity is to be fully virtual at the end of this. For others, they already know that because of what they do, might it be because of the manufacturing, or they're a small company. I was hearing about a small business that is a toy manufacturer. They really like to have their team together to work on prototypes, touch and feel and all of that. And they feel it's really important to be on site. But bottom line, we all have these questions. Where were we before? Where are we today? Or what did our employees experience? And where do we want to be after that? So for me, at least in my own environment, our opportunity is to expand and augment. Expand meaning that we've discovered that there were employees in the past who didn't have access to remote work, who actually should have an opportunity to work at least part of the time remotely. So that's the expansion, expanding that to more positions. And the other aspect is augmenting remote work, because for those who could do remote work before, we might have been limited to 2 days per week, for example. We discovered that they're able to be perfectly effective work and fully remote. So we have an opportunity to augment that. I don't know if we'll go fully remote yet, or it will be mostly remote, but that's something that we'll consider. So that's the opportunity that we have. And so we had to think of a method or framework that could allow us to structure that properly. So what we ended up doing is develop an 8-page document, if you will, that has really the whole set of definitions and clarification on this topic. And I'll explain a little more on the next slides. First, I wanted to highlight that we felt that it was very important for us to have core principles, that we wanted to come up with a model that was going to be consistent across the organization, meaning we need to bring consistency across. We didn't want to have one team or division that was going to do one thing when the other team and another team in the same department was going to do something else. So there has to be consistency across. That's very important to us. We want equity, meaning that any position type, any type of job should have access, all employees in the same type of job should have access to the same level of remote work, or be eligible for the same level of remote work. So that's very important for us to be equitable across the organization. The next piece is compatibility, meaning because we're part of a larger organization and structure, we need to make sure that it's going to be compatible with the rules that are in place or future rules that will be in place. So we've done a lot of engaging others to make sure across the organization they were moving with us, and we were not going to end up, our model was going to be viable immediately, and we would not run into major issues once we start implementing that. And finally, there is flexibility. One thing that we got when we did the surveying of our teams is that each division or teams really want to have some flexibility on how they implement the model. We want consistency, but let us decide how we make that happen in our team. So that's the aspect. And so what we decided to do is we came up with this eligibility profile concept, where we have 4 different profiles. In the past, we really only used 2, and we would have the office-based profile, which is basically employees who have to be working on site, and there might be once in a while working remotely, but generally they're on site. We have regularly remote staff who can work less than 50% remotely, so they might be 1 day or 2 days per week consistently working remotely. And then for what would be new for us, because we've never been to that extreme, is have mostly remote staff where they are working mostly remotely and not in the office. They come once in a while. And then fully remote staff who actually might come in the office occasionally, but their main place of working is remote. It's somewhere else than an office. Odile, I see you, you might have a question for me.
Yes, Thierry, there is a question. When you say equitable, across the organization, is there a risk that the department will go with this while maybe the rest of the organization doesn't?
Yeah, that's a great question. That has been a threat for us from the get-go, and so it's been extremely important for us to engage the powers that could derail our work. So we've been very engaged with the central human resources group, very engaged with the budget office, making sure that whatever we have or whatever answer we look for, and I'll detail a little bit the different areas we have to cover. They were what we were doing, they were aware of it, and we didn't see any major obstacles so far. But it remains a threat, because I think as we will move forward, as the institution catches on, we will need to adapt a little bit and tweak our model. The good news, though, is that because we brought them in, we know they're aware of what we're doing. They have the opportunity to tell us, oh, don't go there because that's going to be too difficult for us to do, or it's not compatible. So we've minimized that, we mitigated that risk by engaging everybody. But it is definitely something we need to be careful about. Another thing that's pretty obvious to me is that, and that's why I was interested in presenting today, what I'm seeing is that a lot of organizations are thinking about doing things, but they may not have a plan just yet. And so we have a plan, and the challenge of being on the forefront or trailblazing with your plan is that you might have to adjust to what others are doing in the future, because it's so fresh out of the press, right? So that's the one thing that I have to be careful about. So that was a great question. I hope I was able to answer that correctly. So let me now step into the many questions. So now you understand the general framework that we have, where we want to structure remote work and define different eligibility profile for remote work. And then each unit can decide, for this type of job, of this type of position, this type of profile is best suited for the type of job and what they do. But now for each one of those profiles, we had to really ask ourselves a number of important questions in different areas. And those are just 9 of the main areas that we had to think about. So, and we had to compare, what did we do in that space before, and how should we do things differently? And I'll go through some of them now. So for example, we had to think about paperwork, right? In the past, we had a teleworking agreement that had to be signed and filed officially with human resources. We didn't include the remote work options in our job description. What do we do now in the future? And that's what we had to think about. We'll probably drop the teleworking agreement, but we want expectations, so it will go into job description. So you have to think about, will there be some kind of formal expectation setting, and will it be put on paper somewhere? That's the paperwork aspect of things. The allowable remote work location is particularly interesting to me, because so far, since people were mostly in the office, it means that from a geographic area, they always were close, or at least within driving distance of the organization, right? But the minute you go into a mostly remote kind of position, or a fully remote kind of position, then the question is, can I work from anywhere I want? Can it be from a different state? Can it be from the other side of the country? Can it be in a different country? And so we had to really think about all of those things. What's compatible with what we have today at the institution, what our organization, what are we going to be okay with? So that's really something that, as each unit will have to think about their position type and what they do, they're going to have to figure out, what am I okay with? And so that's a big one. There was something else that I was going to say, maybe about the allowable remote work location. Oh, another thing too, and it's minor, but in the past, we've always asked employees to identify in their teleworking agreement where they would be working from. That they would be in their office, at their home, for example. That was their remote work location. But employees can do their best work from many different locations. Some do their best work from a coffee shop. So can they do that? Why couldn't they work from a coffee shop? So it's really rethinking all of those different rules that you had before, and understanding, do they really apply now? And so it's a transformative work. The in-office workplace is where it's important to think about that as well, because in the past, again, since everybody was mostly in the office, we've always, at least in my organization, we've always allocated every employee had a desk, a place where they would sit. That was their office, their desk, their location. But the minute you go into mostly remote staff or fully remote staff, why should an employee, would be very costly for an employer to retain a space that sits mainly empty for an extended period of time, which is what's happening now for us working remotely. We have tons of space that's not being used right now. So for an employer to be able to optimize its space and augment what it can do with the space and get to some cost savings there, you really have to let the employees know that if you're going to be mostly remote or fully remote, you will have to use a shared space, a collab space. It won't be a space that will be dedicated to you. You have to be willing to let that go in exchange for the opportunity to stay remote. For anybody who will be mostly in the office, then you still get the choice. And as a matter of fact, for those who will be always in the office, because some individuals don't have the luxury of having a separate room in their home where they can have privacy and do some deep work. They're interrupted all the time. So they really want an office space at the employer's location. And so those people should probably have first bid on all the offices we have and not a cubicle space. The next piece is work schedule. So if you're within the same country in the same time zone, that's great. But the minute you have people that might be in a different time zone, then what's the work schedule? Can the work of that individual be done asynchronously compared to the rest, or should it be done at the same time as everybody else? And so should you have some agreement on what the work schedule is? Technology equipment is another area we've had to rethink. We've always provided a full package to employees, but what we've realized in the past year is that now we can ship, computers, and all of the security settings are on the computer. So it's an important tool that is designed to protect the information of the institution. But so it makes sense for us to ship around a pre-configured computer. However, what's happening is now shipping displays in particular, or screens in particular, just to give that as an example, is very costly. And it turns out that shipping them back and forth to employees' location and back takes a lot of churn, staff time, just logistical time, and it's not technical work. It has no real value, and it's busy work that's very expensive. And the cost of those items of this equipment is not worth the effort that goes into it. So we really need to change the rules and policies we have, where really staff should be able to, with some kind of stipend or support by the institution, the right thing to do would be to provide them with a stipend so that they can purchase the equipment, own it, and it disengages the institution from having to do all of this logistical nightmare in managing the equipment. Internet connection. We've never required a specific bandwidth or a broadband speed. But if you move into a mostly remote or fully remote staff, that's the main connection to the organization. The main connection to the team is that internet connection. So shouldn't we have a minimum requirements for what the bandwidth should be? And we will be implementing something like that. Elizabeth, do you have a question?
Yes, I do, from one of our panelists. I think this is an excellent time to interject the question of security. So whether or not you're allowing the employees to use their own equipment or internet connections, remote work in coffee shops and hotspots, what would be the implication of security in those situations?
Great question. And I can tell you, so again, this is, I wouldn't say theoretical because it's happening now in any event for us. But number one, this is why it's key that the organization, wherever the employee is, should always provide the equipment, the secured equipment to do the work, to do their work. So there is a requirement for employees to use their university provided or organization provided equipment that has been secured and configured so that it protects the work of the employee and the information of the institution. Now that doesn't solve all the problems. Like you said, there are other considerations in the security aspect, which is the network. and where you work from. You might be on an unprotected or unsecured network. That goes into education and training. We provide VPN, so virtual private network, to allow staff to create an encrypted connection to the endpoint. But there are practices each employee needs to be trained and understand that there are steps that they need to take themselves, that if they don't take it, doesn't matter what we've done on protecting the equipment or providing a VPN, if those are not used properly, then the security is a challenge. I believe that it's going to be, it's the place where information security teams will need to step up and really look at this. There are lots of information being provided over the past year to employees on how to do that. But I think in terms of requiring training, we will need to step up our game in that space. So great question. I'll say that during this pandemic, it really feels to me that because our organization were very focused on shifting to the remote work or trying to keep up with really challenging financial times, the security aspect, it feels like organizations are in a vulnerable place from that standpoint, that their attention is somewhere else. And it seems with a distributed workforce, it seems such an opportunity for information security threats. So I'm sure we'll do more in that space, and I'm sure others are doing a lot in that space, but I think it will continue. Information security was already a big topic before the pandemic. It will only grow now, I think, in the next few months. I hope I was able to answer that question correctly. So the next piece is office equipment. So again, we've always provided equipment in the office, comfortable space, chairs, and all of that for people in the office. The minute we have people fully remote, what are we gonna do? Do we have, as an employer, a responsibility for making sure that people can do their work properly in a safe and comfortable way? And if so, how are we going to do this? So the recommendation that we have and we hope to implement as part of that stipend that we hope to have, it would be a stipend that's a combined things. It would be for peripherals and computer equipment, computer peripherals that they might need, like displays, webcam, or things like that. But it would be also for if they have a desk or they need a chair or something like that, they can purchase that if they're fully remote, so that it is not institutionally or institution purchased equipment that has to be returned, avoiding the whole logistics of that. So the idea would be the right thing to do is some kind of stipend, a one-time lump sum that could be used, that's reasonable, that could be used for helping the employee make their remote situation more comfortable and well-equipped, while still providing the minimum, which is the computer and maybe a docking station as well. Now, another interesting aspect is, so let's just assume that you now have mostly remote or fully remote staff, and you're going to go that route. Well, it is still very important and essential to bring back the team together at least once in a while. So does that mean you need to develop, each unit or each division or group team need to develop a budget for travels to required team events? How many retreats are you going to have? Is it going to be 4 times a year, twice a year? That adds up quickly if people are in a very distant locations and you have to fly them in, and maybe there is even a hotel stay somewhere. So that's a challenging piece for a public institution or public service organization or governmental agencies. In the private sector, I've heard, for example, just an anecdote, but a law firm, for example, because they know exactly how much they're going to save by stopping their lease on some office space, millions, they can take some of that money and reinvest that into the team gathering and the travel budget. So just a portion of it can be reallocated to make the experience and continue to build teams properly. So that's something to consider as you think about offering that. Are you going to bring your team together, and do you have the budget, or can you build a budget for that? And then finally, there are a lot of tax implications for staff who decide to work out of state or in a different location or a different country. And so the question that the organization has to ask itself is, are we willing to take on that cost? So that's beyond the scope of what my work group has worked on. But we know we've asked those questions. Are we positioned today to have people, if that's the case, if some unit want to do that, if they want to hire somebody internationally, are we positioned to help with that? Are we positioned to register as an employer in all of the state in the United States? That comes at a cost. So those are considerations, a lot of questions that need to be answered, and you need to map those. What did you do before? What are you going to do in the new normal for each one of those profiles that I highlighted earlier? So let's see, let me do a time check here quickly. 9:07, very good. Another thing that we felt important to do is we're really not just thinking about changing the remote work options. It's really about moving to a new kind of culture, a more advanced remote work culture. And therefore, it is a mindset and a philosophy that has to be really well understood and adopted by everyone, is particularly the leadership and the management. They have to understand these are the values, these are the values of that culture that we are promoting moving forward. And that's quite a significant shift. So in the framework that we developed, we really put down on paper what that mindset is, so that at the time of getting approval to move forward, it is really understood by everyone. This is now what we should promote moving forward. So for example, if you want to move into a more advanced remote work culture where your team is much more hybrid and mostly remote, for example, you really have to highlight that moving forward, you're no longer providing remote work as a privilege to employees, but it's really as part of the company's strategy. That's a win-win, where it's really optimize the value for the employer and the employees. So that's really has to be highlighted. It's also going into the mindset that work is not a place. Work is what you do in furtherance of your organization. So it's a different way of thinking of things. And if, not all managers and not all leaders are in that mindset just yet, but that's something that has to be realized. I'm not going to go through all of those here, but I'll just highlight the challenge of having one culture or an overarching culture, a set of values, that philosophy and mindset, and the subcultures or the subcultures that can be created in each team. That's really the role of management and leadership, to make sure that that culture remains consistent, that the values remain consistent, and to understand that staff experience work differently depending on where they work. So if you have an employee who is a fully remote employee and another one who's on site all the time, the work experiences of those two individuals is very different. And as a manager now moving forward, you have to make sure, as an organization, we have to make sure that we equalize those work experiences, that there is not a favorable treatment. So I'll give you the example. Let's just say now you have a fully remote employees, or a couple of them, and then everybody else is on site. You bring all those people into a conference room, and then you usually, and that's what we did in the past, we would provide a link for others to join in. Let's just say that people in the conference room happen to have donuts that day or pizza, right? Very quickly, for the employees you've hired who are remote, it's going to start to feel like it must be nice to be in the office. They get, we're really second-class citizens here. So you really have to think about everything you do has to really equalizes the experience for everybody. If some people have donuts in the office, maybe the people who are remote should be getting donuts as well, or nobody should be getting donuts if you really want that. So it just, the information sharing, everybody should have equal access to information, to opportunities. And so might they be remote or in the office, the hybrid environment makes that a lot more complicated and has to be dealt with. And so that's very important in the culture to do that and promote that. I hope that's helpful. I'll switch now to where we are at. So as I mentioned, we have you understand the forces, you understand this way we can structure those positions, remote work, how they can be allocated or decided position by position, what's the best fit or eligibility profile when it comes to remote work. How are we going to move forward from here, and what are the steps to get there? As I mentioned, we're right there at this point. So the way we see the roadmap, the steps moving forward, there are 7 of them. So first it starts with the final approval that the mindset, philosophy, the framework is approved at the department level by the top leadership. So step 1 through 4 is very much top down, but it's approved and move forward. Once that green light is given, then there is some work, the work shift to each division, if you will, or team. And there every department now will have to decide, okay, we have the framework, we take time to digest it, understand it, and then let's decide what are the limitations or boundaries we want to set. Because of the nature of what we do we really want to have fully remote position? Do we want to allow that? Or do we really want to limit ourselves to other profiles, for example? So there is some work that needs to be done at the management level in each division. Once that has been figured out, we believe it's important to emphasize the training and coaching of management. It is key, and I have a slide after this to highlight that, but there's a critical role for management in a hybrid environment or mostly a fully remote environment. The management is the glue. It's what keeps everything together, especially if you have virtual employees who are remote all the time. The culture, the connections to the team, the connection to the organization, the trust, all of this is built by the manager. The manager is the glue, and that's the person who actually make that happen. So we really want to focus on preparing the management with the new mindset and the new understanding of what it means to manage in that environment, and how to use the framework with your staff, and how to talk to staff about the new levels of remote work they might be eligible for. Moving from the managers then to the staff and employees, that's where there's going to be one-on-one conversations between supervisors and employees, or that's the way that should happen, because we offer flexibility and choice. Employees will understand, based on their job duties and their role, that work will have been done to decide what is the level of remote work that's available to them. And then employees have a choice. It's not because your position has been identified as one that can be mostly remote or fully remote. It doesn't mean that you're required to do that. Maybe for your own circumstances, you prefer to be in the office, and that is fine. So that's where it's important to understand there is what employees are eligible for, and there is what they will want to do. And that can be two different things. And with that information done with all the staff, you move into step 5, which is now each team has an understanding of what the future will be. They can forecast the change they'll have. And we want to move then into a trial phase, a period of time where we can test things out. You know, we need to make sure this is going to work before we make long-term decisions. So this is where it's important for staff to try that, experience that, and then make decisions in the future. So that's quite important for us to understand. I'll just say that depending on where you are, a trial period might not exist. I remember reading an article about some organization who have decided already that their opportunity is to become fully virtual or remain fully virtual. And there's not going to be any trial. They just decided it's going to be done, and that you like it or not as an employee, that's it. And so this is what I would call the one size fits most approach, which is this is the way it is, and there is no choice and flexibility for the employee. So I believe that a trial period is great when you can afford it, and so that you can then make some long-term decisions after that trial, deciding, okay, we don't need to correct course, or we need to correct course here, but we know how much of our space we can let go or not. And we know also what kind of changes we need to make to our spaces, for example. So I hope this roadmap and the road ahead is helpful to see. Just a quick word on the critical role of managers. I'm not going to highlight that, we don't have time, unfortunately, today, but the way that you manage a virtual team, or the way you manage in a hybrid environment with mostly remote employees, is very different from how you manage a team that might be sometimes remote, but mostly in the office. There's a huge gap between the two. It can look quite different, and there are skills and competencies that are required and needed for that. I use this quote here just to highlight this, because I thought it's helpful to see it from the FACCMN that the problems with work from home don't, and I can see actually everything here, give me a second, don't emerge because employees are no longer working in the same space. Its weaknesses arise when leaders fail to create new ways for employees to connect. So this is just an anecdotal or a quote here, but I do believe that one of the main role of management is for that connection to happen. A lot of things used to happen in an office by chance, just because people were together. They just happened. You didn't need to work at it. People would talk to each other, would by chance meet up and share information and share practices, and the culture would continue to exist that way. The minute you're in a fully virtual environment or a mostly remote environment, then all of those connections, it has to be designed, it has to be intentional. So everything is intentional, from trying to create socialization within the group, that managers have to intentionally make that happen. Getting people together, or the team connected, or the onboarding, all of those things, it's a very different approach and requires a lot of a different set of skills in terms of communication and in terms of attention, I will say. So that's just a brief segue, a brief parenthesis here that I think it's important to highlight that the role of managers is essential for the success of a new remote work framework, or as you rethink remote work. And I didn't want to skip that before getting to my closing thoughts here. So let me, oops, there we go. So closing thoughts. Here are the couple of points that I want to make about where we are at. So first off, it's still a very fluid situation, meaning that we know we want to offer choice and flexibility, but who knows if things will be required for us. We don't know that. That's the approach we take, but the larger organization, which I remember Elizabeth asking me the question, or Odile asking me the question about that, forgot who asked, what will the organization decide to do in the future? We'll have to adapt to that. Right now, we believe choice and flexibility is the way to go. But as I mentioned, some organization in the end might decide, this is what we're going to do, and this is a requirement, and you don't really have a choice. For example, could an organization decide to move to a more virtual environment by requiring, just like they can require some budget cuts, they could require some space savings. So they could say, you next year or the next 2 years you need to let go 25% of your offices. I don't really care how you do it. You just need to let go 25% of your offices. That's a saving you need to come up with. We've not heard that, but an organization could do that. That could be an approach to get teams and departments to do that. We know it's going to be a journey of iteration, meaning that this is a first model. This is a framework. We know it won't be perfect. It will need to be adapted and tweaked. We don't have an answer for all the questions just yet, but we have to start somewhere. And we believe that a model like this can be successful in structuring remote work and at least planning the future, the post-pandemic future. Now, a question came up, which on my slide, sometimes you see post-pandemic. And I remember one of the employee that we surveyed, remember asking, well, what is post-pandemic? And most importantly, when is post-pandemic? And I think that's a very important question. When will the new normal really start? And that is a really hard question right now. We've been now in that mode for 11 months now. We don't really know what's going to happen with the vaccines. The vaccines, will they remain effective? Will they become available? Is the new normal when people have access to the vaccine? Anyone who want to be vaccinated will have access to the vaccine. Is the new normal when there is vaccines plus a cure? And what can happen? So there are a lot of uncertainties and still fluid. So I know the way sometimes I ask myself, instead of continually thinking, trying to plan or the after, or trying to say, let's wait that this pandemic, let's wait the end of this pandemic and things will get back to some kind of normalcy on a new normal. maybe after 11 months like this and more uncertainty, the question might be, what if the new normal is what it is today? What we have today? That's it. That's the new normal. And we'll have to keep going the way it is and adjusting here and there, but that's our new normal. And if that's the case, how does that change your mindset or your thinking process by saying, well, if this is the new normal, then that's the baseline. That's what we have today. And our goal then is to improve on that and make things better from here. That's another way to look at it. And that's something I think a lot about. The other thing that I want to highlight is that this, as we rethink remote work, this is really transformative work. And I think it's just focusing on the remote work options and what staff will do. It's ignoring a significant aspect of, well, and I highlighted the number of questions you have to answer, right? When you think about remote work, there are all of those consequences that could come from that. But you also have to rethink the space. And rethinking the space is important, and that can be a significant endeavor for an organization from a facilities management perspective or real estate perspective. Managing that is a lot of work. So just to give some thoughts is, so what if you have to rethink your space by, what is the space for deep thinking and for concentration and privacy? And what is the space for teamwork and collaboration? And if you think in those terms, should the space for deep thinking be at home, or should the space for deep thinking be some location in the office? So there is a lot of thoughts around how you might optimize and reuse your space and rearrange all that, which is also very expensive. Remodeling is really expensive. So for public institutions or government agencies, I wonder where the money would be to really do a fantastic remodel of the space as well. So there are some thoughts there. And then there is managing, obviously, all of those leases and all of that. I think you need to ask yourself too, is why should employees come back in the office now? If they're not in the office, maybe they were in the office, but why should they be in the office? And when should they be in an office? That's part of that space, the use of the space and the rethinking both space and the remote work. I talked about space for privacy and deep work. And then the other thing that I realized in the process of going through this work is that who owns all of this change? So I mentioned I'm in IT, but this work, this kind of project spans human resources, finance, HR, finance, communication, it's facilities management of space, it's about culture, it's about leadership and talent development. So it's a very broad, working on that kind of project it requires a broad set of expertise and fields. And so you really have to bridge all of those. It's multidisciplinary. And so owning that work, owning the leadership or leading that change, to me is something that organizations have to think about. There is who's going to lead the change in each team, and there is who should lead the change at a department level, right? To oversee all of this in a consistent fashion so that you can make a decision as a department, not unit by unit, which could be very inefficient. And what I realized from other webinars that I have attended in the past 6 months is you see those jobs happen with the title of VP of People or a Director of Workplace Experience. And I realized from this work why those positions exist is that managing that culture, managing all of this work. I mean, those are the ideal individuals and the ideal place for that change to be led. And so I'm wondering if what we're going to see in the future are more organizations creating those positions so that they can better manage all of this work. So that's the end of my of my slide deck, and I think we have some time left for questions. Actually, a couple minutes for questions. So Elizabeth, anything new in the questions?
Well, just for you to have the opportunity to expand a little bit on that hierarchical dilemma. You know, yeah. What if, and we spoke to this a little bit earlier in the chat about the university, for example, where you have certain lead departments and then the lag. Could you just address that? Do you recall what we were saying?
Yeah, I touched on that a little bit already, and I think it's, as I mentioned, it's a threat for us, and it's something we just need to keep. We need to stay ahead of, and this is why we do a lot. I mean, the solution right now for us, I mean, in my opinion, is communication. Is just to engage and broad and bring as many people as possible. So the more I'm able to talk about it in my organization, the better, because in the absence of having a top-down approach, if at least it could be a bottom-up pressure where everybody's talking about the same topic and the same ideas, I'm hoping that it's going to mitigate some of that challenge. And most importantly, as we bring this up regularly, those conversations can lead to identifying the showstoppers. So that is the mechanism that I found to deal with that hierarchical discrepancy where you might be moving faster than your institution or your organization. But with communication and transparency, there shouldn't be any surprise in what we do. And if there are showstoppers, there are plenty of opportunities for those to show up. I don't know if it's going to prevent them, but at the very least, we're trying.
Merci, Thierry. Thank you. With regards to communication, and paper has an interesting question here. Anne is writing, I am wondering if you have a perspective on the remote communications tools that we are all using now, Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google Meet. Are these tools effective? Are we measuring their effectiveness? What are the areas for improvement, enhancement, optimization?
All right, that's so are they effective? Yes. I mean, that's my thought, because clearly organization have been, at least in my experience, is that we've been able to be operational and fully effective using those communication tools. So yes, can they be improved? Yes. They have limitations too. What I do know is we are trying to use the right tool for the right type of communication, right? And there are so many out there. You have a number of consumer products that you can use. But so video conferencing is now used very all the time and works really well. I guess the only challenge is that there is still a slight delay. So I hear, when you hear about Zoom fatigue or Meet fatigue or Google Meet fatigue, it doesn't matter. There is a slight delay between my voice and what you see. And so the audio and the video, and the brain has to do a constant adjustment, and it gets to be really tiring to constantly adapt to that slight delay. So there are improvements that could be made. I think it's important for communications to really set some standards with the teams. So really asking, and sometimes it's individual preferences, asking each team member, how do you prefer that what is the equivalent of me coming and knocking at your door? What is the quick way for me to do that? Is it text messages? Is it doing that through Google Chat? Is it we are all using Slack? Or, you have to figure out what is the tool that makes sense for different circumstances, and use different tools for different purposes. But you have to be fluent and ready to use their communication tools you use for synchronous communication, and asynchronous communication is finding the right tool for the right type of communication, basically. But there are plenty out there. I think, though, we got that from the surveys. People are missing camaraderie. They're missing a lot of things that they had in the office, and it's not exactly the same. You can be effective remote, but a lot of people still prefer to meet somebody in person. So communication tools will go so far. I don't know when VR, virtual reality and augmented reality will come in, where we'll have goggles and we'll feel like you're transported into the office through remote ways, but that could be an interesting future as well. But we're not there yet, at least not where I work.
Thierry, can we squeeze one quick question in?
Sure, yes.
So as to respect our last question in the Q&A from Cody, how is your team responding to the work from home program you've implemented?
So as I mentioned, we've not implemented this feature just yet. We are fully virtual right now. That's my team. My team currently is fully virtual. We are, by the nature of being IT or not, we were very prepared for shifting to fully remote. So we were, you know, sometimes for us, it was more incremental maybe than others. So we already had staff who had practiced working remotely maybe once or twice a week. And so moving from that to fully remote, they were equipped, they were ready to go, they had practiced it. So for us, the shift has been pretty okay. Overall, I mean, my team, as I hear from them, we poll, when I ask questions from them, they've been very happy with the way it works for them. The one thing they're missing is they wish they could see their teammates and their colleagues once in a while and go to lunch. The camaraderie aspect, you know, when you could just pop into an office and say, hey, do you want to go grab lunch? That's really nice. It's not something that's as easy now. In the future, even if we're fully remote, you know, once the pandemic recedes, or hopefully we can get back and socialize a little easier, I think some of the pressure and the people crave personal interactions with people because they're limited right now. I think once the pandemic recedes and we can get back to a more social life, I think that feeling of missing your colleague is gonna be reduced, because you'll be able to go, if they're close enough, I'm assuming they're not too far, you'll be able to go to have lunch together regularly, or go on a walk if necessary, or something like that, and see each other, even if your primary place to do your work is your home. So so my team has been doing well. We've done the full spectrum now, from being in the office to doing fully virtual. We can be anywhere in between. The key for us, though, is less of and I know some employees prefer to be in the office, and that's fine, we'll respect that. So some employees, to answer Cody's questions correctly, I do know that there is one of my staff who really doesn't have a good place to work at home. Very small apartment, it's really difficult, and would love to go back in the office and get a workspace back on campus for us. And I totally respect that, and I think it's very important, and I wish we could provide that right now, but that's not part of the rules that we have, or the options we can offer right now, because again, we are still under the mode where if you can work remotely, you must work remotely, and that's the stance of our organization, at least until June. After that, it will be different. So I hope that helps answer the question, Cody.
Thank you very much, Thierry, for using and for sharing your experience for the benefit of our audience. We probably would have many more questions, but in order to respect everybody's time, we'll wrap up now. If anyone would like to co-host a morning virtual coffee and discussion and have the FACCMN promote the event, please don't hesitate to contact us at info@faccmn.com. Thank you all for the privilege of your time. We are looking forward to seeing you soon again, and I wish you all a very great weekend. Thank you, Thierry. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Thank you so much, Thierry. Au revoir, merci.